breaking down everyday workplace issues and diagnosing the hidden sickness, not just the obvious symptom. Our hosts, James and Coby.
Did we lose a patient?
No, that's just my lunch.
Hey, thanks for joining us. I'm Coby, he's James, and let's get started with a question. What is some practical psychology for the workplace?
Yeah. Okay. So this episode's going live on New Year's Eve, and we typically, towards the end of the year, we will do a let's look back over the last year and what lessons can we learn from it, or let's look forward towards the next year. An episode just kind of recapping or seeing what might be coming down the pike. However, it's 2025, and trying to recap or make sense of what's been going on in 2025 kind of feels like an exercise in futility. And based on what's happened this year, Lord only knows what 2026 has in store for us. So, in an attempt to save what's left of our dwindling sanity, we are going to talk about practical psychology instead. So Coby's going to introduce a psychological concept, and we're going to discuss why do we need to know this? What does this look like, and how does it actually affect the workplace?
Cool. Yes. Very happy to dig into nerd out on some psychology for the last episode of 2025 and not acknowledge the
That's
recap.
just moving on.
Yeah,
It's
move.
happened, move on.
Yeah, but no idea what's coming for next year, or wouldn't even want to begin to guess that on that. So let's just stick with what we can control, which is how we interact and understand people. So I
Hmm.
think that's why this is it's good for us to end the year off with a conversation around practical psychology. So this is a third episode that we've done on this. We did an episode, kind of I think it might have been season two, and then we did an episode I think in season three talking about it. We'll probably have this be a format that we'll use again probably this season.
It's been fairly well received so
It has
far,
been,
and
yeah, no,
the
and
practical psychology piece, really understanding. The
mhm,
more we can understand what drives the behaviors that we're seeing, the
right.
better we can actually respond to and identify what we are observing in the workplace and how we can actually guide the behaviors in a way that is actually productive and constructive.
Well, and again, like as much as we kind of joke about the kind of chaotic nature that's been this past year, the thing is that what is a constant is the fact that we can still better understand people as humans, and with a better understanding, we can have better interactions and more meaningful engagement, and ideally improve how we work with them. So there is a lot of value in us looking at these
Yeah.
different effects and these different kind of concepts and theories and biases and everything like that to kind of just know that our fellow human is a human, and there's possibly a cause or a reason for why they are the way they are. So these are great things for us just to be known in our personal life. There's also value in our personal life knowing this stuff does not just live within the workplace. So lots of benefit that someone can get from this conversation. So that being said, let's jump into the first one. So I'll just start talking about it, and then James just make sure that it
Yeah,
makes
I'm going into these cold. I'm familiar with some of them, but I'm going to just sit here and grill you and try to make you explain what it is, why it's important, and then we can figure out how do we actually apply it.
sounds good. So the first one we're going to talk about is called the halo effect. Now, this is one that some people probably have heard before. The halo effect is really kind of understood as when we attribute positive kind of attributes, or we kind of round up on someone based on their physical appearance, if they're attractive, or based on kind of the reputation that other people might have said about them, or if they're charming and charismatic. We also assume that they're smart and diligent and those types of things too. It's like people that we like for whatever reason, or things that we like for whatever reason, we give more grace to, and we give more sway in their kind of in their characteristics, or in their approach. Like we're inclined to attribute positive characteristics to attract a person, even if we haven't never really interacted with them. So it's one of those things where like, like we have we create this bias about someone or about something that we find, that we're drawn to, or that we see kind of the ability for, or we assume that, because they are, again, if they're charming, or if they're charismatic, or if they're outgoing, or these kind of things too, we assume that they are probably, more intelligent, or we kind of give them more grace, or those kind of pieces like
We
that.
like what they're doing in this area, so we
Yeah.
automatically assume that another area is going to. So I'm assuming this isn't just like I have a personal relationship with somebody and I'm nicer to in the workplace to somebody who I already have a relationship with or a friendship with. This seems to be more of a um, I really appreciate the work that you did on this particular domain. So I'm going to assume that anything else that you do, because I already have this positive impression of you,
Mm.
it just kind of carries over into everything else. Is
Well,
that
you're right, but it's actually where the effect tends to happen is not necessarily. So if you have a positive relationship with someone that you work with, you'll be more patient with them. You'll assume that they know more. You'll round up with them, and that
Mhm.
could be based, but that could be based on context, on seeing them succeed at other situations. But that's really in relation to your ability to kind of give them that extra leeway. But the halo effect is actually more, it's actually something that we see as patterns of behaviors where the groups react to the individual, not necessarily your personal piece to someone else. So for example, like really friendly and outgoing coworkers get their bad work ethic or their mistakes ignored at a far greater rate.
Okay. So I actually see it happen, unfortunately, happen in the reverse, where somebody who's not as outgoing, who may be introverted or
Mhm.
quiet or may not be as boisterous,
Yeah.
they may be passed over for opportunities, or they may, right? So it kind of happens in both the positive, the halo effect talks more about the positive, but is it the same piece on the negative end, or is that something else entirely?
It's something else. It's called the horn effect,
Okay.
right? So the idea kind of, like again, very, very biblical,
Yeah.
right?
Angels and demons.
Really, no, but that's really kind of like, again, being the halo effect is that positive association, where the horn effect is the negative association. But like even things like, we think that a cute stapler will use it more, and if it starts to break, will be less. We'll almost be like, more patient with it, whereas like a regular standard one we might throw out faster, even if it stops working as much, right? So like it is this piece where things that we're drawn to, we have more patience with, we give more reverence to. Um, Again, like charm is one of those things where a charming person is given so many more opportunities to improve behavior, or they're being rounded up so much more, because again, because we see that, because we assume, because they're really good at the people skills, the charming pieces, we assume that, oh well, they must, be good at these pieces, right? So it really is about that, when we find something that we're drawn to, we have so much more, again, patience, reverence, ability to kind of round up on that thing for across all other spectrums.
Okay, so I guess the big question is why do we like how does this actually not so much how does this play out, but why do we need to know this as managers or leaders? Like what purpose is there? Because I mean, it seems pretty reasonable, explaining
Mhm.
it. It's the, if we like one aspect of what somebody's doing, we are going to be more patient and understanding and give them more opportunities. Doesn't sound like necessarily a bad thing.
Right. So why this is something that we need to know about and how it impacts our workplace is really the fact that this is a bias. This is absolutely a a sense of inequity that we're just accepting as being a normal thing. Because like again, the most classic example are people that are with people that are physically attractive.
Mhm.
Again, we when we meet someone that's physically attractive, we're someone that just looks good.
It's why everybody likes me. Moving on.
Moving on. No, but the idea that we also assume that because we like how they look, we also assume that we're gonna like how they act. We're gonna like what they say. We're gonna like being, around, like, right? So so there is that
And we've
piece.
heard that for years from like an interviewing from a recruitment standpoint that, people who take care of themselves, who are physically attractive, tend to be the ones who get the job opportunities, the promotion opportunities. So the halo effect is really maybe a big contributor to what's driving that phenomenon that has been well documented in the workplace for ages.
Yeah, but the truth is, the halo effect is an error in our judgment. And what
Right.
it actually does is it reflects and kind of reinforces individual preferences, prejudices, social perception, and it can create inequity, right? And so one of the things too is that I like to always, when we talk about halo effect, I always like to kind of tie it back to first impressions, right? Because the another effect that I think we talked about kind of casually is confirmation bias. So confirmation
Mhm.
bias is when we're interacting with someone, we already kind of have an opinion of them. We're looking to have that opinion reinforced, right?
Right.
The idea of, like kind of again, so if I have the halo effect hitting me where I like this person and they completely screw up, I want to confirm that I'm not wrong about liking this person. So I'm looking to find a way to give them an out or explain his internal factors or whatever it is, or say, oh, everyone makes mistakes, but I'm really trying to justify my previously held or a bias, trying to find confirmation for that, right?
Right.
So again, it's when we positively attribute, intelligence or good meaning or someone's mistake. We say, well, actually, no, that's not a mistake. That was intentional. It's strategic, or they're just kidding, or those types of things. It becomes almost like like a blank check to try and write off bad performance, bad habits.
Right.
And again, going back to what you said earlier, where you kind of were talking about the halo effect in a negative way, again, the horn effect. The horn effect is something that is also really important for us to be aware of too, is that we overly judge people based on often on their physical appearance. Or if they made a bad first impression, then we look to kind of confirm that negative first impression. And with confirmation bias, we go, well, if they were, I didn't like them the first time I met them, so I'm looking for more reasons to not like them. So
I
conflict,
had a negative interaction for them, and then every time they open their mouth, it just drives me up the wall.
absolutely, absolutely. But these are all those things too, is that we're creating these errors in judgment
Hmm.
based on our personal preference. Like again, often it's based on the things that we find physically attractive, right?
Yeah.
And but it also reinforces our prejudices, and it really does kind of like create a bit of like a social hierarchy as well, right?
Right.
Whereas again, I mean, this is kind of why, like they say, like straight white middle-aged men can only fail up is
Hmm.
largely because of the halo effect, right? So
Halo effect combined with confirmation bias,
yeah,
and people just
yeah, people just
overlook the negative and overemphasize the what they see as positive.
exactly. So like and again, like but like but what's funny is how ingrained in us the halo effect is, because like I said before about the stapler, there are people buy cute little like tchotchkes or cute little like like things that they have kind of like again like a cool stapler. I have a really funky dinosaur staple remover, like those types of things that we get attached to those little developed
Yeah.
items. But then if we have a regular one and they both break, we'll always like we'll always give the other one the cute one they were attached to. Say, oh, it's also bad. I'm not gonna throw that one out. But like to me, that holding on to that is just that how ingrained in us this halo effect is, that we say, oh, I'll always give more patience to something that I am drawn to, or that I like how it looks, or those types of things, right? So
So how do we because it comes down to perception, right? We're
Right.
talking about these aren't actually people who we liked aren't actually better at all things.
No.
It's our perception of them. So
Yeah.
how do we actually try to mitigate or combat the halo effect so that we are not being um, prejudice is not the right word.
No, but prejudice is actually the right word.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I mean we're being like
We are
taught.
prejudging people based on one
Yeah.
an other interaction.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, like we see that like again, like recruitment's a great example. The more attractive candidate gets the confirmation bias and gets that first impression bias and gets the lift on that kind of things, right? So I mean, the first thing that we need to do is we need to think critically and quickly reflective of ourselves, right? Like try to take a step back, and when we're looking for reasons to give someone grace or give someone like a third chance or whatever like that, maybe it's a matter of going, okay, why is that, right? Like let me just take a step back and go, okay, let me just kind of check myself here and being like, is this a bias that
Mhm.
I'm leaning into? Or is this something that, there actually is a reason for this additional third chance or this additional grace or whatever it is that and part of it is just trying to like again figure out, am I a slave to my human psychological programming and the halo effect has kind of taken over? Is this friendly coworker that's bad at their job, someone that I'm willing to be patient with more so than someone else, or right? So part of it is just that critical reflection piece to think, is this something that I'm bringing to the work and to my
Mhm.
interactions? And probably you are. I mean, this is so ingrained in us that it's also so common. And I think that and again, this I don't want to get into the impact of this in our personal lives because that's a that's a conversation on for someone else to have. But but this lives within us. But how much of a hold it has on us is more up to
Mhm.
us if we're critically reflective of it.
Yeah, it's unrealistic to think that somebody is going to be able to not
Yeah.
fall into this bias
Mhm.
because it's a common psychological trait. It's part of what makes up our DNA as human beings.
Mhm.
I think the concern that I have is more so on the flip side, what you refer to as the horn effect, and
Right.
that we as leaders and managers are not looking for opportunities to penalize people who we don't necessarily have that great first impression with, right?
Yeah.
So that, I mean, the two together, yes, it's not good to gloss over the mistakes that somebody that we like has made. That does a lot of harm to team morale and
Yeah.
performance. But just as importantly, I think, is understanding and recognizing the pitfall that we can walk into if we are if we have that negative association and how damaging that can be.
Well, but you're right. But think about how impactful these two effects are together, right? That we're giving people all kinds of second chances and rounding up to someone that we like or that is friendly or charming or good looking, and we're giving no grace and we're cutting no slack and we're being like extra hard on people that are not friendly or are not physically attractive or maybe
Mhm.
are a little bit socially awkward, right? I mean, does that sound like workplaces that you, the listener, are working in? Likely it
Yeah.
does, right? So this is again that.
I wonder how much this is exasperated by like with cultural differences as
Oh,
well,
massively,
right?
massively.
Like,
Yeah.
and how systemic it becomes of if we are presented with something that we're unfamiliar with or have a negative impression of for whatever reason, and
Mhm.
how that plays out in the workplace. Like it sounds like although the halo effect almost sounds positive,
Yeah.
right? Because we are attributing positive characteristics and rounding up for people.
Mhm.
The way that it plays out and the reverse of it, especially from a cultural or from a protected grounds,
Yeah.
could be actually not only damaging, but legally, that it's how we could find our organizations running into discrimination challenges
Yep.
and racism and unfair labor practices and these types of pieces without it's not about intent,
No.
but intent is less important than what actually happens.
Right. Because the decisions being made, why they're made, are can be often be irrelevant to the fact that they're made and people are acting on them.
Yeah,
Because you're right, the halo effect puts organizations and people at risk of all those things that you mentioned, right?
yeah,
So it is something that we need to be very clear to check our biases on because it's something that is probably, again, it's wired into us to think this way.
yeah.
So it's something that we need to be critically reflective and take a step back and kind of like challenge our assumptions. You kind of be okay, why is this happening? I need to challenge this bias. Is this, is this something that I'm legitimately, correct on, or could there be more at play that I'm not seeing, like the halo effect or the horn effect?
Yeah, I think the last thing that I'll say on this is really from a management or leadership perspective, it's
Mm,
really important to understand these biases so that you are able to be consistent and fair and
yeah.
equitable with your team members. But for our friends and listeners in HR,
Yeah.
the way that this can play out seemingly innocently,
Hmm.
because I don't think it would be malicious, it still presents significant risks to the organization from a discrimination or from from that perspective. So
Yeah.
interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, let's move on to the second one. This one is called the negativity bias. Now, the negativity bias is a cognitive bias where even when positive and neutral things of a fairly significant intensity happen, things that are more negative in nature, that are maybe of a similar intensity, have a much greater effect on our psychological state than those neutral or those positive things. Because our brains are wired to focus more on negative emotions, which is one of the reasons why making emotional health or having again we talked about like emotional load and those types of things like that, right? But improving our emotional health is much more difficult without a very focused intentional effort because we are more wired to process those negative emotions. So it's kind of, in effect, it's the idea that bad things have a stronger, larger impact on us than good things do.
Right. So if something bad happens to us and something good happens to us, we
Mhm.
are far more likely to focus on the bad.
Right. Yeah.
Simple way to put it.
Yeah.
So this is kind of, I mean, we've heard over the years, or like I'm not going to try to cite anything, but the idea that it takes more positive interactions to offset a negative interaction. So whether we're talking about from a marketing perspective, right? Like it will people will look at reviews of a product
Mhm.
and they will look at it may be 4.7 stars, but they're going to look at those 1 star reviews, right?
Right.
And figure out what those are about. And they may actually give more credence to the 1 star reviews than they would to the, 5,000 5 star reviews, right? So that
Yeah.
is that
Yeah.
a way of
Yeah. That
interpreting
that
it?
that is one way, but even kind of, because like, again, one of the things that they teach people kind of like, who are looking to improve like mindfulness or those kinds of things too is to intentionally focus on positive interactions and gratitude because our brains are wired to ignore those and focus on negative things and kind of like and like negative emotions
Right.
because like so I mean if you wake up in the morning and you wake up on time to your alarm, you wake up lightly, you go down, you pour your morning coffee and it tastes just right, and and like the house is quiet, but then you trip and spill your coffee. All you're gonna ever remember from that morning was that you spilled the coffee, not kind of the two positive things of waking up kind of gently on time and having your coffee taste right that hits you. Is you're only going to remember that one negative thing. That's going to be the thing that kind of like clouds your morning. Like just like when you ask someone, how was your day? If their day wasn't bad, they're like, it was okay. But if like one bad thing happened to them, it was a bad day, regardless of
Right.
what's happening kind of around that. It is that, we're wired for to look out for and to prioritize the negative experiences, the all those kind of pieces because it's just part of our DNA. And the reason for that is because like so again, as early humans, as like kind of like when we were kind of like developing kind of like towards like Homo sapiens, we had to pay attention to potential threats, right? So the idea of like, listening for, like predators hiding in the bushes or listening for those kind of things like that, being aware and and processing potential threats was a make or break life or death situation for us all, right?
So it's
Where
born out of more of a survival instinct.
it is because again, if we avoided a danger, that has a much bigger impact on our lives than say missing out on a positive opportunity, right? Or something good happening to us, like right? Like I mean,
Right.
that bush that's shaking, could it be a tiger or could it be like like something or that is easy for us to kill and eat, right?
Right.
It's better to not take that risk survival wise, right? So it's better to miss out on avoiding the negative thing. So the negative thing is where our focus is. And again, and we talked about we see this when we talk about like you and I, not so much in the podcast, but in some of our work, we talk about kind of the psychology of marketing.
Yeah.
And one of the things we talk about a lot in that is loss aversion,
Yeah.
where we are weighing potential losses much more heavily than potential gains. We'd much rather avoid losing something or missing out on something than actually get something. Like the
It's why FOMO is such an effective marketing tool, right? It's the fear
yeah,
of missing out.
right, exactly. Yeah. So we look to avoid a potential loss. Like again, like if like people that invest, for example, if they're much more hit by a dip than by a spike because that dip is seen as more hurtful because we're processing that emotion more so because like anything that goes up well, is probably going to come down. So like there's that pessimism piece to it as well, right?
Mm.
But I mean, this is why the negativity bias is kind of so impactful on us because it really does just highlight how ingrained in negative emotions and negative kind of outcomes or negative situations are, and that it would take so much more positive or even neutral things that are get overlooked and get ignored for us to actually kind of have the same effect. Now, what is so dangerous about this combined with the horn effect is that if we have a negative experience with an individual, then or then the confirmation bias creates that negative first impression piece, and then we're looking for those negative pieces as well, which is why the horn effect can actually be something, as you were saying, can be so much more devastating than the
Right,
halo.
because we are more wired to look for the negative,
Yeah,
right, which is the negativity bias that we're talking about now.
yeah.
And when we're looking for the negative and we find it, the
Mhm.
horn effect takes over and we start looking for more negative experiences with this individual.
Exactly. Yeah. That's just it. So like, I mean, a good place to see this in the workplace, right? So again, so how this impacts the workplace
Yeah.
is where we want to get to. Is the idea of like an employee may receive like in a performance review or kind of feedback from their manager may receive a lot of really positive like feedback,
Hmm.
but they may have like a couple, two or three things for them to work on. Those two or three things for them to work on are going to be what rattles around in their brain at night more so than all the like 10 things that they're excelling at, right? So there is that piece too that we tend to kind of like not so much focus on the areas that we're doing well on because part of it too is thinking about this. If you're trying to coach someone and they're doing things well, they're not going to focus on the things that they're doing on making the things that they're doing well better. They're going to focus on trying to kind of like pick up the slack on the things that they're not doing as well on, right? But all that really does is that because again, we focus on that too. So we're more focused
Mhm.
on you. Hey, you're doing all these things great. Don't touch those anymore because these two or three things that you're working on or that I want you to improve on are where we're going to focus.
Right.
But the reality is that we're actually limiting someone's potential growth, potential impact, potential career advancement because we're too focused on bringing up the areas they're short on rather than trying to improve them all. We'll end up focusing on just the negative things being improved rather than actually trying to have those be improved but still maintaining positive, impact on the they're doing well.
This might be a tangent, but it seems somewhat related because we often talk about from a team dynamic and team performance standpoint around strength-based approach,
Right.
right? We're not trying, everybody has strengths and weaknesses, and kind of the traditional idea of trying to bring everybody, work on your weakness so that you can bring those up is how we see a lot of people trying to play out from a team dynamics or from a performance management framework rather than allowing people to lean heavily into their strengths. And it's not that we ignore or negate the weaknesses, but we build team approach to be able to compensate for weaknesses rather than focusing on them.
Mm. Yeah, no, no, and that's just it because we don't like people having negative attributes or weaknesses. And even if we're able to negate them through them working with someone else, we almost and this is one of the challenges that we run into when we're trying to kind of shift organizations towards that more strength-based approach, is people get stuck on, well, I want them to fix the things that are negative. And
Yeah.
we're like, well, yes, we do want to look at kind of, again, trying to make sure that there's not gaps or holes or that, or productivity is not dropping because of these pieces. But see, largely, do they have to be good at everything? Or can we accept that,
Yeah.
or can we accept that there's stuff that they're not going to be great at, but it's someone else's strengths make up for their weaknesses? Like, again, if someone's not very organized, but they're really good at with people, and we have someone that's not really great with people, but is really organized, if they work together well, why do we have to really focus on making them all good at everything rather than,
Yeah.
sorry, letting them focus on them doing the stuff they're good at and letting them, and then not so much focusing on the negative pieces, but we're hardwired to not like those negative pieces, and we see that more in them rather than almost like it can often be overshadowed what they're good at by what they're bad at. And that's the other thing too that really kind of impacts this for the workplace is someone's negative attributes may stand out more than all the things that they're good at to us as coworkers, to us as managers, or even to our bosses. We're more bothered by the two or three things that they're not great at than
Hmm.
all the stuff, and we kind of forget about all the things that they're really, really good at, and it makes us reductive, right?
Yeah.
Makes-
And that makes a lot of sense to me because I'm now seeing a lot of recent conversations or interactions that I've had where, you know, a staff member may have have brought concerns about manager forward. And, it's what seems to be a relatively minor aspect of the totality of what the role is and the interactions. But they've become very laser focused on this one negative attribute that they don't like,
Mhm.
that all of the other positive things that has happened, all the positive interactions, and this is somebody who has gone above and beyond for this, like the manager has gone above and beyond to support the individual and to, make sure that even so much as, giving them covering for them when they've had an emergency that they had to take care of, just
Right.
from my perspective, the manager has been quite effective,
Mhm.
but they're still laser focused on this one thing that they don't like. And it seems like they've completely forgotten or ignored all of the positive interactions that they've had, all of the times that the manager has stepped up and helped them or supported them. And it all becomes about this one, in my view, relatively minor negative concern that they have.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's just it because again, the weight of the negative emotions on us is so much heavier.
Hmm.
Because I mean, like, and again, this is also why improving our emotional health personally gets harder, right? Because again, both with the negative emotions that we have from someone else is overshadowed, like in this situation, the employees negative emotions with regard to this manager are heavier than the positive experiences that should create positive emotions.
Yeah.
It's not weighted the same.
And you can't logic your way to an emotional response, right? Like even
No.
trying to sit down with this person and work through some of this with them has been
Mm.
somewhat challenging
Yeah.
because it is an emotional response.
Right.
And no amount of logic is going to change an emotion.
No, but the other thing too is like our brains are really wired to kind of look at this, to put this extra weight on the negative emotions. Because again, whether we're talking about negative emotions towards someone else or even towards feelings that we have for ourselves, it means that our emotional health, whatever we need to resolve to improve our emotional health, is not something that can happen without intention
Mm.
because the cards are stacked against us when it comes to this negativity bias. That if we're going to actually improve someone's emotional health or emotional kind of like, reaction to things, then it has to be about very intentional desire to do that. They have to see the error and the weight that it's putting on them.
We
Again,
almost need to acknowledge the negativity bias first before
yeah,
we can ever move past it. Because if we don't acknowledge that we
yeah.
are weighting the negative experiences far more heavily than we should, then we're never really going to be able to move past that.
Right. And like in the episode that we did recently about like why are you so tired at the end of the day of work, right? We talked about the emotional load and the kind of
Yeah.
cognitive appraisal theory, right? Because with that, it's the idea that we're attaching this negativity bias, this heavier weight of negative emotional reactions to an individual, then something that it creates a heavier emotional load on us. So we're hurting our relationship with them. We're hurting their reputation in our eyes. We're also hurting our own emotional health by carrying all this weight on us. So
Right.
there's a lot of harm that comes from this negativity bias, where again, because again, we're making this that we can't create good emotional health when, without intentionally trying to identify these things, without being critically reflective again, without kind of, again, labeling kind of the bias that we're carrying, being open to be carrying this bias, um, and trying to rewire how we think about ourselves and these people. You really cannot do a great work around emotional health without this intentional effort and this focus and this commitment to it. Because again, we're trying to avoid the predator in the bushes rather than trying to like, because that's a bigger concern to us than what might be an opportunity that could be a more positive thing to us. We'd rather avoid the negative than experience the positive.
Let's move on to our last one.
Great. So the last one is one that we talk about a lot when we talk about job dissatisfaction, and you're more familiar with this one.
Yeah.
So this is the two-factor theory of of emotion and hygiene. So around our office, we just refer to it as Herzberg theory because Herzberg is the kind of the author of this theory. It's kind of an older theory from a
Yeah.
long time ago.
Herzberg's motivation hygiene theory. You can
Yeah.
look it up. It's a well structured, well
Yeah.
regarded academic theory.
Yeah. Now, for us, we use this as one of our core foundational theories in how we do organizational assessments and
Yeah.
kind of and how and really this is to us this is an anchor theory for workplace culture
Hmm.
because the concept of the theory is that there are two major factors that influence kind of influence our relations culture and people's attachment to their work. There's hygiene. There's hygiene factors, which are things like company policies, salaries, working conditions, the kind of the status you have, the interpersonal relationships with people. So again, a lot of those like factor pieces that when it comes to like policies and salary, we expect them to be fair, them to be kind of adequate and competitive, and all the other kind of pieces. And the idea is that if they're insufficient, if they're not handled well, those hygiene examples, if they're not handled well, it creates dissatisfaction in the work. If you feel like your policies are not being fair and being used against you, if you feel like the salary is uncompetitive and not sufficiently meeting your needs, if you feel like the work environment is dangerous, or there's low job security, or those kinds of pieces, it creates this level of dissatisfaction. Now, again, we talk about this all the time. We talk about job
Yeah, you're going to hear a
dissatisfaction.
lot of common language to what we already use because Herzberg, as you said, is kind of foundational to several things that we talk about. But I think fundamentally, the two different we've got factors that create job dissatisfaction, and
Yeah,
we've got factors that create job satisfaction.
right.
And the big learning piece
Mhm.
from Hertzberg is understanding that these are separate issues. And oftentimes, companies try to focus on creating, like modifying those factors that create satisfaction. So,
So
achievement or advancement, recognition, those pieces. They want to remove job dissatisfaction by building job satisfaction.
for this, let's talk about it through the lens of the motivation hygiene theory, okay? Because again,
Okay.
the hygiene examples are those things, the policies, the salaries, those job security. And again, though, if those hygiene factors are not sufficiently met, it does create this discontentment, this dissatisfaction, this dislike of our work because we don't feel like those basic things that we need are given to us in the way that we need them to enjoy or appreciate or have any kind of reverence for the work that we do. It makes us unhappy and dissatisfied. Now, on the other side, like you said, there's the factors that create the job dissatisfaction, but these are the motivating factors, ones that kind of create the motivation. Those are things like you said, achievement, recognition, advancement, responsibility, personal growth, the work itself, those types of things, those qualities that we have. And if we have those in a job, then those are things that will start to give us more motivation, will start to give us more attachment to the work, we'll start to feel more connected to the work that we do. But like you said, you can't improve motivation when these hygiene factors are not there. So if the salaries are really insufficient, then you can't, and people are feeling unhappy with their work, creating more opportunities for advancement doesn't balance those out. So
Mhm.
the whole idea is that, and we talk about this in some of our other programs, that if the trick to resolving the hygiene problems that create this unhappiness and this dissatisfaction, if you do that, if you address those and you make those sufficient, you get people to a point where they're not dissatisfied, or as we call it, the jobs are neutral. There's a neutrality. The jobs are okay. No big complaints is kind of how we talk about it, right?
Yeah.
Now, when you get to a no complaints type of workplace, that's when the motivating factors, the achievement, the advancement, the recognition will start to take hold. And if you start incorporating those things, people feel a sense of accomplishment, or they feel like they've got their contributions are being recognized, or there's career growth. That will start to create that motivation built on this the job is okay, this neutrality, we're not dissatisfied. Then we'll start to really see this increase in people's ability to be motivated and create this satisfaction. I'm really proud of my job.
Mhm.
But that's really the thing is that you have to resolve the hygiene issues before the motivating issues will have any ability to be successful.
Yeah, and so tying this to how it affects the workplace, I mean, this one has a huge impact on how people engage in work every day.
Yeah.
And the common mistake that we see is that companies will want to jump right to, if people are unhappy, then let's put a recognition program in place,
Yes. Yes.
right? If people are unhappy, then we are going to hold a, during the we're gonna hold a recognition or award ceremony, or like we're gonna do go through these steps to show how much people are appreciated, or we're going to stress the fact that there are internal advancement opportunities, or we're going to, we're going to work on these motivating factors. We want to motivate people to be happier,
Mhm.
and that doesn't work
No.
if people are actively dissatisfied.
Right.
And the way that we use this theory at Roman 3 is that this really, Herzberg's informs a significant amount of our workplace culture hierarchy.
Yep.
And we talk about it from the framework of you will not be able to sustain a feeling of belonging at work or a sense of feeling engaged in the work if there's active dissatisfaction, if people are upset with the factors of the workplace.
Yep.
So we have to start at the foundational level to address the factors of the workplace to make sure that they are competitive, sufficient, and equitable.
Mhm.
If you've been tracking with us for any length of time, you've heard us you're probably tired of hearing us say that.
Mhm.
But it is so foundational to how we start to shift perspective, perceptions around how people feel in their jobs. And if we can, man, for a lot of places, if we can get them to the place of, meh, it's not bad here, that's a win,
That's a huge win. Oh, no, you're right.
right? But
Yeah.
it's that we
Yeah.
need to get to that point before we're going to be able to really sustain success at the higher levels of the workplace culture hierarchy.
Well, here's the thing. Like, I can't, I mean, we've experienced this. I'm sure you listening have definitely experienced this at some point in some job. You're at a company event and they're trying to make this intentional effort to recognize people. And they're like, so they're trying to give this big thank you. And you hear your coworkers, or you're the one saying this, like, they really appreciate us. They'd pay us more, or they'd give us these full-time contracts, or, they'd, make sure that the workplace is safe. That moment is what happens when organizations are not acknowledging and following Hertzberg's theory of motivation hygiene.
I
It's
don't want a
that.
pin thanking me for 5 years of service. I
Mhm.
want my manager to treat me with respect.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, completely fair.
Yeah. And those moments of like, if they really appreciate us, they'd pay us more or whatever. Though that feeling is the breakdown of organizations not following Hertzberg's theory.
Yeah.
That's that. So it's and we see it's so visceral for people to feel it, and we see it so often. But that is such a foundational piece that is why they can't, reward ceremony, career ladders, and career growth, and like kind of like giving people more challenging jobs. Their way out of people hating their work because you're tackling the wrong problem. You
Yeah.
haven't asked yourself the important question: what needs
What
to
needs to
exist
exist
first
first?
for this to be effective? And that's exactly what it's. Hertzberg's theory was foundational for us developing just that being the question we ask every time we do something new in an organization. Is that one question?
And every time we asked that question, the answer became Hertzberg's theory.
Yeah.
I cannot stress enough how important and influential Hertzberg theory has been in how we approach so much of our work,
Hmm.
and how it guides what we do. It is such an important factor to understand because not only are you not going to sustain success, but if you have a large amount of, call it dissatisfaction, call it anger, call it resentment, whatever, feelings of discontent, you can do more harm than good by trying to address the motivating factors. If you have not addressed the hygiene factors, if you have not addressed the core workplace factors that drive job dissatisfaction, if you have managers who are inconsistent and treat people poorly, you pay, the compensation is not competitive, sufficient, or equitable. There's no job security, and the working conditions are unsafe or not good in general. And you stand up and try to recognize or motivate people,
Mm.
it not only comes across as shallow and insincere, even though you may be very sincere in your attempt to do it,
Mm.
it can come across as insulting.
Right.
And that's why it's so critical to understand how this motivation hygiene theory really it impacts so much of the employee experience.
It does, but I mean that those negative feelings that they have for their workplace when these motivation or when these hygiene factors are not sufficient falls into the negativity bias, right?
Right.
We
Yeah.
we focus so much more on that. So again, we ignore the things that you're trying to do, organization, to improve the little perks you're trying to give us, try and make up for it. But you're fixing the wrong problem, and you're not asking yourself what needs to happen first. So that bad is stronger than good is so reinforced in the workplace. And then again, then we start to get these managers are inconsistent. Then we get into the whole horn effect piece where we're writing them off, and everything we roll our eyes at because everything they say just drives us crazy. It all plays together.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why our workplaces are so complex, why they're so exhausting, why these systemic issues just are so pervasive because people don't realize that these effects stacking on top of each other. And that's why when we go into organizations and we start off with our talent security assessments or whatever we do when we first go into organization, everything is looked at from this organizational psychology perspective to make sure that we're unearthing the stuff to find out what has to exist first before the solutions the organizations want to achieve will be successful. And that really is why all of this impacts our workplace and why we need to know all of this. Because we have to understand the complexity that this stuff lives in our organizations.
That's a pretty good summary. I like how it all ties together.
So, that about does it for us. For a full archive of the podcast and access to the video version hosted on our YouTube channel, visit roman3.ca/podcast. Thanks for joining us and have a great new year.
For more information on topics like these, don't forget to visit us at roman3.ca. Side effects of this podcast may include improved retention, high productivity, increased market share, employees breaking out in spontaneous dance, dry mouth, aversion to the sound of James's voice, desire to find a better podcast.